What's up, team players? Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got another teamwork build for you guys, but this time I'm covering the Gunslinger. Remember, patronage at any tier gets you a cool Google sheet with this build, my previous armor inventor build, and any future builds I do on this channel, as well as some other cool perks. Let's get started. Some of you guys may remember my very first teamwork build where I built a support gunslinger using the playtest rules. Unfortunately, that build isn't viable anymore. So today I'm going to be redoing that build, except with a different gunslinger way. Today we are building the support sniper build. That of course means we need the way of the sniper. Now the way of the sniper is all about being stealthy and doing a lot of damage. However, that does not mean we can't help our party at the same time as doing that. The Gunslinger class has plenty of support feats. And even if we were going for max damage, which we're not in this build, we still wouldn't be able to take all feats that would help with damage. With this build, we want to do as much damage as possible while still helping out our party. Most of our damage is going to be coming from our way. Speaking of which, our way gives us a few things. First off, our Slinger's reload will allow us to be stealthy and reload at the same time, for one action. Then we have our initial deed, one shot, one kill. We're going to be using an arquebus for this build, so this deed will allow us to interact, to draw it, as a free action. As long as we roll stealth for initiative, that is. This will also allow us to do extra damage on our first strike of the combat. Again, our way is where our damage is going to come from. Once we get our advanced deed, we'll get vital shots. For two actions, if our target is flat-footed, then we deal an extra die of damage. The target also takes persistent bleed damage equal to the amount of our one shot, one kill. And then of course at level 15 we have our ghost shot. So if we're undetected or hidden from our target, then we get our one shot, one kill damage. If we would already get that damage, then it doesn't stack. And if we were undetected, we're just hidden now because the origin of the attack was clear. Alright, we want to be stealthy from as far away as possible for this build. So for our ancestry, we're going with Elf Changeling. That way, most enemies won't be able to keep up with our 30-foot move speed, and Changelings have access to some pretty good stealth feats, so we'll be taking those as well. And our background for this build is going to be the Deputy background. Experienced Tracker will help us find enemies that get away from us. The starting ability scores for this build should be Strength 14, Dexterity 18, Constitution 10, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 14, and Charisma 10. Now it's time to get to what you guys really care about, the feats. I'm starting with Cover Fire. So we make a strike, and the opponent we're targeting must decide whether to duck out of the way or not. If the enemy ducks, then they gain a +2 bonus to their AC against that attack, or +4 if they happen to have cover. But they also take a -2 penalty on ranged attack rolls until the end of their next turn. If the enemy does not duck, then you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to your attack roll for this strike. This is going to help against ranged attackers. Once we make that first strike, ranged attackers are probably going to know where we're at, or at least have some idea. We can use this feat to get our melee attacking friends into melee combat with the ranged attackers. That way the ranged attackers have something else to worry about, and we can use the distraction to hide again. This of course sets up even more damage for us. But it also allows our melee attacking friends to do what they do best against ranged attackers. Next up is Warning Shot. We attempt a demoralization check using the maximum range of our weapon rather than the usual 30 feet. We only get this against one foe, which I never understood, but we can do so from really far away. We also don't take the -4 for our opponent not understanding our language. Is this a little counterintuitive? Yes. However, this feat can be excellent for teamwork. This feat is an excellent way to lead foes into an ambush. Also, we're not going to be able to be stealthy all the time. So if our foe can already see us, why not demoralize them? Get that frightened condition. Especially at high levels, we're only going to need one strike per round. However, we're still going to be taking running reload. This will allow us to stride, step, or sneak, and then interact to reload, for one action. This means we can hide, then sneak off using this feat, and still have an action left to shoot, even if our firearm is unloaded. This could be very useful if a melee attacker is coming up on us. And then of course we have Sniper's Aim. For 2 actions, we can make a strike with our firearm. We gain a +2 bonus on the attack roll, and we ignore the target's concealment. Also, if we're using a firearm with the kickback trait, which we are, then we don't take the penalty for not having a high enough strength score, or for not using a stand. That last part doesn't matter. We have enough strength that all of our strikes with our firearm aren't going to take that penalty. However, getting a +2 to hit when we really need that damage, and ignoring concealment, that part's great. After all, we're a sniper. Of course we're taking this. Next we will be taking Smoke Curtain. For 2 actions, we can make a firearm strike. When we do, we also emit a 20-foot emanation of smoke around ourselves. This smoke lasts until the end of our next turn. If our strike is a critical failure, however, our firearm misfires. This is just a way to give us concealment so we can hide when melee attacking enemies are coming near us. Plus, since it's a 20-foot emanation, that means anyone within 20 feet of us also gets this concealment. Great for that ranged rogue or any other ranged attackers you happen to have in your party. Called Shot will allow us to target one specific part of our foe's anatomy and make a ranged strike. If we hit and deal damage, then we apply certain debuffs depending on the part we targeted. For example, if we chose to target the foe's arms, then they become enfeebled 2 for 1 round. If we critically hit, then they become enfeebled 1 for 1 minute after that. Great for those big, strong enemies. If we target the head, then the target becomes stupefied 2 until the end of your next turn. And on a crit, they're stupefied 1 for 1 minute after that. Great to use this one against spellcasters. If we target our foe's legs, then they take a -10-foot penalty to speed until the end of your next turn. And if we critically hit, they're slowed down by 5 feet for 1 minute after that first initial round. We can also target the foe's wings. This makes them fall 20 feet or 40 feet on a critical hit. Unfortunately, they do fall gradually, so they don't take the fall damage. As a gunslinger, we're going to be critting with our firearms a lot. So we want to use this feat a lot. Probably once per foe, simply because we're going to get those extra effects for 1 minute a lot. And all of these debuffs can make a huge difference depending on the situation, especially the head one against spellcasters. Now how about we talk about Shooter's Camouflage? For this feat, we're going to choose natural or urban terrain. While in the selected terrain, we can hide and sneak without cover or concealment. Obviously, what you're going to pick for this is going to depend on what terrain you're in more. The great thing about this feat is you're going to be in one or the other during combat in most campaigns, especially if you're in an AP. But if you're in multiple different terrains, you can still take this feat until you can take the legendary sneak skill feats, which of course requires you to be level 15 at least to take. Then we want to take our ultimate feat, Headshot. With this feat, we make a firearm strike. If we've damaged the target within the last minute, and we get a critical success on the attack roll, then the target must make a fortitude saving throw against our class DC or die. A creature that survives this is temporarily immune for 1 day. Obviously, creatures that don't have a head are immune to this, and creatures with more than 1 head might survive. This does have the incapacitation trait, which means it's difficult to use on enemies that are higher level than you. That being said, this feat can be really good for taking out enemies that are giving the party trouble. We mainly want to try to use this feat on bosses that are our level or lower, but this is obviously not going to work against things like oozes and Dullahans. At 16th, we'll take Deadeye. This will help us against invisible creatures. When we use this feat, we can see invisible creatures until the start of our next turn. We do so by reading the air and other cues that less observant people would miss. This makes the invisible creature only concealed to us. This feat will work great with the Sniper's Aim feat we took earlier. This also allows us to attack enemies that our party can't because they're invisible. Next is unerring shots. When we're attacking with a ranged weapon in which we have master or greater proficiency, which we are definitely going to have with our firearm, we're level 18 at this point, we ignore the range increment penalty. Plus, our opponent doesn't gain the bonus from lesser cover, only gains the lesser cover bonus if they have standard cover, and gains the standard cover bonus if they have greater cover. We're a sniper. We want to be extremely accurate, even at ridiculous ranges. So this is going to help with that. So if enemies decide to come after us, all the better. We're going to be really far away. So if enemies spend actions trying to get to us, that's actions they're spending not attacking our allies. Our arquebus has a range of 120 feet. That means enemies are never going to get to us. Meanwhile, our allies can continue attacking them while they're trying to get to us. And the last feat on this side of the free archetype is going to be Slinger's Reflexes. Now at the start of each of our enemies' turns, we get an extra reaction to use any gunslinger reaction. I know it doesn't look like it yet, but thanks to the free archetype, we're going to have a ton of reactions. And this feat will give us a ton of reactions to use every round. Extremely helpful. Now it's time to talk about the free archetype. We're only going to need one free archetype for this build, and that is the Sniping Duo archetype. Let's start with the dedication. When we take this dedication, we choose one ally to be our spotter. Our foes don't get lesser cover against our attacks from our spotter. Also, whenever us or our spotter successfully strike a target, the other one of the duo gains a +1 per weapon dice damage on their next strike. We are definitely going to have the prerequisites for this feat at level 1. Also, this will allow us to help out a specific ally. Although we're also going to be taking some feats in this archetype that can be used to help out the entire party, not just our spotter. Speaking of which, our next archetype feat is going to be Assisting Shots. So we can make a ranged strike, and if we hit, the next creature to attack that target gains a +1 circumstance bonus to their attack roll. If we critically hit on our strike, then the bonus increases to +2. This is the only feat we're taking in this build that has the press trait. That means using this feat requires us to have a multiple attack penalty. Yeah, this feat is mainly so that we can help out our party when we're not being stealthy. Because like I said before, we're not always going to be able to be stealthy in this build. We certainly want to be stealthy in this build, but that doesn't mean we're always going to be able to. Next we have Exploit Opening. When our spotter quickly hits a target that is within our weapon's first range increment, we can make a strike as a reaction. We take a -2 penalty on our attack roll, but we don't take any multiple attack penalty. This is just so we can attack during our spotter's turn, especially if our spotter happens to go before us and get a crit in the opening round. Then we can go straight into that massive damage. At 8th, we'll take Targeted Redirection. This is for all those situations where an enemy has cover against you, but not your spotter. After you use this feat, you treat your spotter's position as your position for the purposes of cover and range. However, your spotter must use a reaction to redirect your strike. However, if you and your spotter have built towards each other, which you should do anyway for all your party members, then this should be no problem. At level 10, we'll take Tag Team. This is a reaction you can use when you or your spotter miss an attack. If you use Tag Team after your spotter misses an attack, then you can make a ranged strike at a -2 penalty. If you use this reaction after you missed a strike, then your spotter can make a melee strike against the same target. This means that even if one of you misses a strike, the other can still attempt one during the same turn. It's probably better if you give your spotter a strike with this feat, since your spotter doesn't take any penalty on the strike granted by this feat, whereas you do. This is just another reason why it's good to help out others instead of just yourself. Eagle Eyes will essentially give us and our spotter the effects of the Deny Advantage Rogue class feature, while we can see or hear our spotter, and our spotter can see or hear us. This essentially means that while affected by this feat, foes of our level or lower can never make us or our spotter flat-footed. However, they can still help higher level enemies flank. This is especially helpful for our spotter, because with this feat, most enemies aren't going to be able to make our spotter flat-footed, which of course means higher AC for them. Next up is concentrated assaults. So if both us and our spotter use the ready action for a strike against the same creature and choose the same trigger for the ready action, then resolve both attacks at the same time. Also, both us and our spotter can use the higher of the two attack rolls, but each character uses their own modifier. Plus, if both strikes hit, then combine their damage for the purposes of weaknesses and resistances. This feat right here is the pinnacle of teamwork. In order to use this feat, you and your spotter both have to be on the same page. But it is a very effective feat, especially against enemies that have resistance to piercing or bludgeoning damage. And now we come to the main reason why we took Slinger's Reflexes. An ally must be hit by an attack in order to use our deflecting shot reaction. The ally gains a +2 bonus to their AC against the triggering attack. But what makes this feat so good for teamwork is that we can use this reaction after the result of the attack roll is revealed. This way we know whether the +2 will change anything. For example, if that +2 would turn a hit into a miss or a critical hit into a regular hit, we want to use this feat. Otherwise, probably not. Being able to use this reaction against every single enemy every single round is fantastic for teamwork. Alright, we're coming to the home stretch here, but our next feat is Vantage Shots. So when we successfully make a ranged strike against a foe, our spotter can use a reaction to make a stealth check against that foe's perception DC. If successful, that foe is flat-footed against your spotter's next attack, before the end of their next turn. The reverse is also true. If your spotter successfully makes a strike with a ranged weapon, then you can use a reaction to make a stealth check. If successful, that foe is flat-footed against your next attack before the end of your next turn. This feat is extremely effective if your spotter happens to be a rogue, but if not, the first part of this feat is also very effective for teamwork no matter what class your spotter is. Overall, this feat can help both you and your spotter out, and that's the main reason why we're taking this. And the final class feat for this build is going to be Redirecting Shots. To use this reaction, your spotter must have missed a ranged attack that uses either a thrown weapon or ammunition. The ally must also be willing, and the attack's target must be within your first range increment. You discharge your firearm and roll a d20. Your ally uses this attack roll instead of their own. Also, this attack ignores any bonuses the target would gain from lesser or standard cover. While this build is built for your spotter to be a melee attacker, even melee attackers aren't always going to be able to use just melee attacks. So this feat is going to help our spotter when they have to use their not so good ranged attacks. However, unlike other feats in this archetype, this one isn't limited to the spotter. So we can also use it on another ranged attacker in our party, like say a ranger using a bow. Alright, Ancestry feat time. So we're going to start with otherworldly magic. If you look in popular media, and in real life probably too, there's one thing that snipers all have in common. They always seem to wear a headset so they can talk to people on the ground. So how are we going to simulate this? It's simple really, with the message spell. As long as we are within 120 feet, which oddly enough is our first range increment for our firearm, we can talk to our party members so we can figure out the best course of action. Our allies can also use a reaction to talk back to us, or a free action on their turn. So with this spell, we can talk to our allies without giving away our position. And the best part about it, it's a one-action spell, which means we can still move and we can still shoot. Also, when we finally take that concentrated assault feat, this will allow us to coordinate with our spotter to set that up. Very effective teamwork option for this build. And of course, from our changeling heritage, we'll want to take Mist Child. We want to be undetected, sure, but most of the time that's not going to be an option. So this feat will make it harder to hit us when we're concealed or hidden. The DC of the flat check to hit us is 6 if we're concealed and 12 if we're hidden. This feat is mainly to help us against ranged attackers that kinda know where we're at. Then we go back to Elf with Elf Step. This will allow us to step 5 feet twice for 1 action. Let's face it, we're not always going to be able to be stealthy, and we're not always going to be able to stay away from melee attackers. So this feat is mainly to help us get out of sticky situations with melee attackers, especially the ones that have attacks of opportunity. Now at 13th, since we've got otherworldly magic, we might as well also take otherworldly acumen. This will give us a 2nd level spell from the arcane list once a day as an innate spell. The spell we want to pick for this is invisibility. This is kind of our last ditch effort to remain hidden. If a melee attacker is really hounding us, then we can go invisible, hide, and then get another strike on them. Sure, it's only a once per day thing, but that's why we have other abilities to help us remain hidden, or at least concealed. And our last ancestry feat for this build is going to be Crohn's Cruelty. This will give us Warp Mind as an innate occult spell once a day. With this spell, we can target one creature and force it to make a will save. Critical success, nothing happens, of course. On a success, the target is confused for the first action of its next turn. If the target fails the saving throw, then it's confused for 1 minute. If it critically fails, it's confused permanently. This is going to be extremely helpful when we've got a whole bunch of enemies, especially if those enemies happen to be dumb. But even if they're alone, an enemy is spending actions attacking itself rather than the party is always good. Plus, enemies that are confused won't be looking for us, unless of course they already see us. But that's what our feats like Smoke Curtain are for. Alright, now we've got general feats. So of course, we will want to take Die Hard and Toughness so we don't die. And of course, like all my other teamwork builds, we are going to be taking Canny Acumen for the save that we don't get Master in, which of course is our will save. But after that, things change for this belt. We're already an elf, so we really don't need fleet for this belt. So instead we'll be taking Incredible Scouts. We're stealthy and we're good at perception, so we make the perfect scouts. So when we scout ahead, we give our allies a +2 bonus to their initiative instead of a +1. And of course our last general feat is going to be Expeditious Search. We're legendary in perception, so we're going to be able to search areas 4 times as quickly. That'll really help us out when we're scouting, as well as just in general. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. So if you enjoyed it, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel for more Pathfinder 2e teamwork content. You can also check out all the links in the description below. And of course, if you want to see more builds like this, you can check out these videos here. Remember, teamwork is vital, and I'll see you guys next time.